So we can get into the whole line situation here for a little while. These are basic line sizes that I've gone by. I'm going to call this the golden rule standard for fluorocarbon and monofilament, in my opinion. This is kind of where we were at in the industry before all these awesome Japanese lines come out where they're getting super thin and super strong. And so what's starting to happen is, because we see it all the time, these companies are saying, oh, we've got 20-pound test. We've got 20-pound test available in 0.30 millimeters. I usually do the metric side, but we're offering 20-pound test fluorocarbon, but it's so thin, it's only 0.30 millimeters or 30 mil. And you see that all the time. So guys are buying this 20-pound line thinking they've got 20-pound test, but in reality, it's still 0.30 millimeters, right? So what I like to do whenever I'm going through my lines or I buy a line, I don't care what it says on the package. I have a couple micrometers. I've got them in my boat. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I get deep into it. I have the micrometers in my boat. I have them in my toolbox, and I have them at my desk where I work on tackle a lot too. I'm always checking my lines. And another thing too, if I've got different rods that I've got different fluorocarbons on, I can't tell the difference between 10 and 12 and 14 and 17 all the time. So sometimes I may pick up a rod that's been sitting there for 3 months and I go, wonder what line this is. Well, I take and grab my micrometers and go, oh, this is 0.30, this is what I need. Or hey, this is, whatever it is. I know exactly what that line is just by going to the micrometers. But the reason why I feel like this is important nowadays is because they're continuing to make these lines better and better and better. But you have to be careful to make sure that, for one, the line is what it says it is on the packaging, because just because it says it's 20-pound test and it's 0.30, you may get it out of the pack and it's 20-pound test and 0.34. Like, that's not always exactly what they say it is. So you want to make sure of that too. But here's the deal whenever you start getting into some of these super ultra thin lines. So let's just say you've got a 20-pound test and the guy says, oh, well, 20 pounds is what you're supposed to do. Well, he's talking about 20-pound test at 0.43 through a certain manufacturer. You went and bought 20-pound test that's this. And it may be 20-pound test in a perfect world. It may be 20-pound test in the lab before that line ever gets a nick in it. But in the real world of fishing, as we know, how many times you go fishing and never get a nick in your line? You never get cuts in it. Like, it doesn't happen. So you just have to be careful when you go to some of these super lines that you got to make sure that, if it is that thin of a diameter, you got to treat that stuff a little bit more carefully than you do line that's basically true to size. Does that make sense to everybody? So I feel like whenever I'm flipping and pitching for my setups earlier we were talking about, here's my range right here. 0.38 millimeter. I don't care what they call it. They might call it 15. They might call it 12, they might call it 20, but I'm anywhere from 0.38 to 0.43 is what I actually use whenever I'm flipping and pitching. The 0.38 is the least I'll go, and that's more for finesse flipping. We're going to call that 15-pound, but this is more for in between cleaner water scenarios. But I want to say 80% of the time, 90% of the time when I'm flipping and pitching, it's this 0.43 millimeter line, which in my notes, or what I'd like to use is 20-pound test. So does that make sense? Is that getting a little bit too deep for you guys? I'm trying to keep it simple. What I'm saying is it's very important for me to go in and measure these lines. Obviously, whenever you're doing it for a living, it doesn't matter if I'm going out for a club tournament. Like, if I'm going to go out and spend that much time and energy to go out and try to win, like, I want to make sure I've got the right stuff. And if I'm going to compare someone's fishing line to someone else's fishing line, I want to compare apples to apples. I don't want to compare, because they're just changing it so much. And I don't want to say I'm complaining about how they're doing. It's great marketing to say, hey, we've got the strongest. Well, dude, you might have a great 20-pound test that's that thin until it hits a rock. My line's going to hit a rock. And all of a sudden, when you have that thin of a diameter, you take a chunk out of it, it's nowhere near 20-pound test anymore. You went from 20 to like 8 super fast. So I do feel like the micrometers aren't super expensive. They're not hard to use. It just gives you a good gauge on where everything's at. So